Angleterre yoo xam ne boo amut visa wala bëgguloo dem Angleterre ñu yot la xaalis bi ñeneenteeli prize ñaari junne juróomi téeméer hangale ci ñaari téeméeri nit ñu gagné juróomeeli prize gi junneb saakob maale ñu jox ko junneb nit ku ne benn saakob maalo génneel téeméer hangale rek jënd ticket gi te xam nga lu ci gën a neexam boo jëndee ticket gi ba pare fañam time yoo xam ne fa ñoo nekk si télé gi di def panel discussion nit ñi di woote gi nga boo wootee bañ leen a allo gañal
neel allo rek
salaaw
ama demon pour patis mooy bolom doole xamul ndànk.
Back and over now to news beyond our borders. Large parts of Southeast Asia are underwater. Floods have submerged huge parts of the subcontinent, leaving more than 500 people dead in Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam. And there's no let-up in sight as Bangkok braces for more floods this weekend. We have details in this report.
Southeast Asia is underwater, not just part of the subcontinent, but nearly all of it. In a region where flooding is a yearly reality of life, where there's hardly any high ground to seek safety, this flooding has reached record levels. Almost 500 people are dead across Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, with millions more affected and nearly $4 billion in damage. In Thailand, at least 269 people are dead, more than 2 million people displaced by the worst flooding to hit the country in half a century. In neighboring Cambodia, the worst floods in more than a decade have claimed more than 200 lives, including more than 80 children, and some 350,000 hectares of rice paddies across the country are waterlogged, while Vietnam has seen some 24 deaths in the flooded Mekong Delta. It's taken months of monsoon rains to raise water levels this high. In Thailand, evacuations are now underway in many rural towns and villages, and rescue crews are dropping food and medical supplies from the air. A huge effort is underway to try and stop the floodwaters from reaching low-lying Bangkok. Authorities have opened spillways to try and take pressure off dams in the region, but that's only made flooding worse for people outside the Thai capital. Hard choices forced by the power of rain. Relitza Vasilova, CNN, Atlanta.
Egyptian leaders are vowing to change the law providing for the fining or jailing of anyone found guilty of religious, ethnic or gender discrimination. The decision follows an emergency meeting held by the Prime Minister into Sunday's deadly riots. At least 25 people died and more than 270 people were injured in clashes between army forces and Coptic Christians. CNN's Ben Biderman reports on the worst sectarian violence since the downfall of the Mubarak regime.
Cairo's Coptic hospital barely has room for all the bodies, covered with bags of ice and regularly sprinkled with perfume to cover the stench of death. At least 25 people were killed and more than 200 injured in clashes Sunday evening between the army, police, and predominantly Coptic Christian marchers protesting the burning last week of a church in Upper Egypt. Rifat Faik's 54-year-old brother Gamal was killed in the clashes, during which eyewitnesses claim army vehicles drove into the crowd. When we came to demand our rights, Rifat says, they ran us over with vehicles. Miriam, who was at the protest, says all we had was wooden crosses, and they ran us over, crushed us with 3 tanks, then opened fire with live ammunition. The government says that protesters used firearms to attack security forces, a claim protesters vehemently deny. They have tanks, we have prayers, chants this young man. Sunday's violence was the worst of its kind since the overthrow of the Mubarak regime in February, leaving many people to ask whether Egypt's new military rulers are either willing or able to bring the situation under control. There are rising calls from Christians and Muslims for the army to return to the barracks. Buthaina Kamal, a candidate for the upcoming presidential elections, says the generals now running the country must go. They're not patriots, she tells me. They're the remnants of the regime of the traitor, Mubarak. Among the mourners, some called for international protection of the Coptic minority. Others, like Ihab Girgis, want the U.S. to stop supporting Egypt's military.
This is to America. Please stop, help our army, because
You help them every year more than $1 billion. And in the end, that kind of guns we killed. They killed us by this. Obama, you will be happy, Obama, when the Christian they killed by gun made in America.
Several Muslim women came to extend their condolences to the families of the dead. Muslim-Christian relations may be under strain, but there is still a strong impulse for unity. Unfortunately, says Sama, there are Muslim fanatics and Christian fanatics, but we have come here today as Egyptians, and we'll fix what has been made rotten over the last 30 years. In the capital's packed main cathedral, an emotional welcome for the first coffin to arrive. The bloom seems to be off this revolution.
After 3 weeks of bloody street battles, anti-Gaddafi forces in the Libyan city of Sirte say they have got their enemies cornered. A National Transitional Council commander has told Reuters that Gaddafi loyalists are holed up in 2 neighborhoods, but are putting up stiff resistance. CNN's Nick Robertson reports.
Frontline in Libya, fighters for the new transitional government pinned down by Gaddafi's loyalists. 7 weeks after Gaddafi disappeared, casualties mounting in the battle for his hometown, Sirte. But the most important indicator of Libya's future may be inside this grand conference hall in Tripoli. We were tipped off to the meeting here. Powerful commanders of the new Libya vying for power, while their fighters are still dying a day's drive away. Chairman of the National Transitional Council, NTC, Abdul Jalil, trying to adjudicate. At issue here in Tripoli, who controls the capital? Various militias claiming they are the legitimate military authority. It's a problem that's been brewing for weeks, now coming to a head, and could be a sign of things to come. Former Islamist fighter Abdul Hakim Belhaj appears the lightning rod for discontent. He has called for heavy weapons to be rounded up, citing backing from the transitional government. Rival commander Abdullah Naka is one of several threatening confrontation. Internal divisions already pulling apart the coalition that came together to topple Gaddafi.
We gave this council the legitimacy, and if we want, we can withdraw the legitimacy from their transitional council. If we feel it could affect the goal of our revolution, we have no problem doing it.
These are not the only fault lines appearing. Ethnic Berber or Amazigh fighters from the Western Mountains claim they've sacrificed much and want guarantees of power. So too Misrata's rebels to the east, under siege for 6 months, say they're suffering several thousand.
We now go for another second break. Let's join the Central Forecast Office for the weather report.
The Gambia is endowed with a wonderful landscape full of baobab trees. Like its Cape Point in Bakau, it is one of the most exotic sceneries in the world. The baobab tree is a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and resourcefulness. For the baobab tree provides good food in times of hunger, rents its bark for medications, and its sap for glue. In the Gambia, there is a company like the baobab tree, 100% African and purely Gambian in all aspects, in know-how, design, value, capital, and management. That company is Elton. Elton, employing hundreds of Gambians and proudly associating itself with development in the Gambia. Elton, side by side with the Gambia.
Good evening and welcome to the weather segment. As usual, we begin with a summary of today's weather followed by the forecast. Conditions over the Gambia today were mainly warm and sunny. For what will follow, let's start with a look at the satellite image captured at 16:30 hours, indicating the presence of convective clouds